Yay Networks.
I'm Molly Kimball. Welcome to Fueled, a wellness and nutrition podcast. I'm a registered dietitian and nutrition journalist with a passion to help people live their strongest, healthiest life possible. In my weekly TV segments and columns, there's a limited amount of time and space to cover everything, but there's so much more to share. This podcast is my opportunity to dive deeper into the topics you want to know about. This week's podcast is about the life-changing impact of sleep, and specifically quality of sleep. When we think about our health and wellness, especially when it comes to weight or our appearance, for example, we think about our diet, our nutrition, and our movement, our exercise, and we really think of those two things. What am I eating? How much am I moving? What are the calories in, calories out that I'm burning? But sleep is such an essential third element of this. I would encourage everybody listening, if you're not already, let's start putting sleep on that equal tier. It has a huge influence on our cravings, our obesity, our weight, our hunger levels, and then also things like our focus, our attitude, even just how much we're enjoying our lives and our experiences throughout the day. All of these are affected by our sleep patterns. There's a lot of research about the negative effects of too little sleep, and we're starting to see more and more research about the positive effects of getting sufficient or optimal sleep. We're joined in today's podcast by Dr. Erin Hanlon. She is a behavioral neuroscientist and research associate professor at the University of Chicago. Some of her key areas of study include sleep, specifically sleep restriction, as it relates to these things like obesity, cravings, and mood. She also is going to talk to us about why do we snack more? Why do we crave more when we don't get enough sleep? And she's going to share some insight into her sleep research, also just what this research looks like, helping to paint a picture of us to really understand just how these very intricate details, our sleep, our food, our schedules, our timing, how these are all carefully controlled in these sleep studies. We'll be talking about what actually happens while we're sleeping, how much sleep we need and why, the shockingly undesirable effects of habitually getting too little sleep, and the remarkably positive effects that we see when we get enough sleep. We'll cover barriers to sleep, what's keeping us up at night, also strategies for better sleep with a closer look at sleep medications that a lot of people may be reaching for, and some supplements that may also help with sleep. So with that, I want to share a little bit first about Dr. Hanlon, her background, and her expertise. Dr. Erin Hanlon, as I mentioned, is a research associate professor in the Department of Medicine at the University of Chicago. She received her undergraduate degree at Duke University and her PhD in neuroscience from the University of Wisconsin-Madison. As a behavioral neuroscientist, her primary research includes the detrimental effects of sleep loss and how this sleep benefits our health. And as I mentioned, that particular focus on the links between sleep deficiency, obesity, and diabetes. She is focused on the effect of sleep restriction on our brain reward and feeding systems, as well as metabolic systems, testing this in both animal studies, also human studies. Dr. Hanlon also has the remarkable and much appreciated skill of being able to take complex systems and information and make it seem manageable, helping to explain things in a way that resonates with us and is truly impactful. I've already learned a lot from preparing for this interview with Dr. Hanlon, so y'all are really in for a phenomenal experience. So welcome, Dr. Hanlon. Thank you for carving out this time for us. I am so excited for our listeners to learn from you and for myself to learn as well.
Thank you so much for having me, Molly.
I know you study this and this is your world. You research sleep, you research behaviors around sleep, the side effects of too little or adequate sleep, and we'll talk about all that. But you're not always talking about it as much like this. So I know this is a little bit of a treat for you too.
It is. Most of the time, just like everybody else, I'm dealing with the busy work of science and not really getting a chance to sit down and talk about science or the science I like to do or the science we dream about. So it's nice to just be able to sit down and chat about it.
And how did you get into this specialty? Because it's a very specialized area. What kind of led you down this path?
Well, I first started studying sleep in my senior year at Duke University. I needed to do a independent study, and I had just taken a class about sleep my senior year, and then I also had taken a class about food intake and the mechanisms involved in food intake, and I enjoyed both of those classes. And so, for an independent study in my second semester of my senior year, I just asked the two professors of those independent classes if I could kind of merge the things that they study together and do an independent study on the relationship between eating and sleep. So it actually started my senior year in college, and it just kind of snowballed from there. I wouldn't say that's typical, but that is what happened for me.
It's a great example, though, of something that starts out as an independent study for school, and it's like, okay, this is coursework, and I have to fulfill these requirements. But being open, as encouraging students to be open to any and all experiences that come your way, because you never know what's going to just really grab you and that you're just going to fall so passionate for.
Yeah. When I started graduate school, I also, found a lab that I felt comfortable in. It was less about the science at the time and more about my comfort level with the people in the lab and looking for a good mentor. And it just so happened that it was a sleep lab. And so it was less because I would say that I was mostly interested in sleep at the time. It just so happened that the lab that I felt comfortable in and the mentor I wanted to work with was a sleep scientist.
Which is also a lesson to all of us who have students working with us, that you really can make a huge difference. You can be the catalyst that's going to propel someone forward in your field by sharing that passion with them and being welcoming and warm and, sharing your knowledge and being approachable.
Definitely. It definitely shaped my academic career, just personal relationships, I would say.
I love it. I love that from the student perspective and then also the mentor perspective. So looking at sleep, and there's so much to even kind of start to peel apart with this, but let's start with how sleep works. And I'm saying the word works in like air quotes, but what's actually happening during this like window of sleep? What does that whole sleep experience look like?
Well, I would back up a little bit and say that we only started to learn about sleep in the last 100 years, the way that we think about it now. Like scientists used to think that when we went to sleep, that the body wasn't doing anything and the brain wasn't doing anything. And it wasn't until the 1950s that we knew that the brain was actually active during sleep and that there was phenomenon occurring during sleep and that it wasn't just a state of shutdown or rest, for lack of a better word right now.
That is really wild, because I feel like even with my own dreams, they can be really vivid. I'll wake up, I remember them really clearly, but also the processing. And so many people that I work with, they laugh because I'll walk into their office and I'm like, okay, so I had a dream last night and I was thinking about, we can do this. And I'll wake up in the middle of the night and something that maybe was sticking, it was like I was stuck on like what the solution is. And then you get this clarity and it's like 3:00 in the morning. And clearly I was processing it while I was sleeping.
Your brain was working on it. Yeah. Well, that is one of the theories of sleep. There are multiple theories. I come from a particular camp that believes in a theory called the synaptic homeostasis hypothesis, which is very wordy, but the acronym for it is SHI. And I should back up and say that there are multiple stages of sleep. So, there are stages that are easy to wake up from, the ones where you're like kind of when you first fall asleep, but you still kind of hear a TV or you're easily startled awake. That is a different stage of sleep than what happens later in the night, where it's hard to wake you up and brain waves are different for all the various stages of sleep. And so some of the theories regarding what the function of sleep is based on these different stages. So one of the ideas is that when you're awake and you're learning, that comes with actual physical changes in your brain. So the more you learn, the more distinct and connections are made in your brain. And the idea is, based on the shy hypothesis, is during slow wave sleep, which is a particular stage of sleep, when your brain waves look like big, slow waves, and that's why it's called slow wave sleep, is that all those neurons are kind of firing together at the same time to figure out what is new information and what is information that you don't need to know. So right now I'm looking at a white wall and a brown table, and white and brown I have learned, many times over the years. So tonight when I go to sleep, my brain will say, that was a white wall and that was a brown table, but I think we already have enough information regarding white and brown stored in our brain, so that information can go away. And that's one of the hypotheses that has been generated in regards to the function of sleep.
So it's like housekeeping for our memory.
Exactly. And for the brain, right? Because there's limited space. Our brain is in our skull. And so it can't continue to make these actual physical connections and have it just grow and grow and grow and grow. There has to be something that comes in and does some pruning, as they say,
right?
Just like you would on flowers and weeds and things like this. And so if you are awake too long and that information doesn't get pruned away, then things get a little bit cloudy because all of that stuff is in there kind of junking it up.
Which is really interesting because if it's a project that I need to have clarity on, for example, preparing for this podcast, before you and we have our huddle call before we do this podcast. And before that huddle call, I was reviewing and I wanted to have my thoughts together to share with you. And I started to look at that one evening. And as I was looking at it, it felt very muddled, exactly as you say. And then I said, I'm just going to go to bed. I'm tired. And I woke up the next morning and looked at it first thing with that clarity, and it was like a whole different level of clarity. And I think that helps me understand that, I guess, on a personal level of what you're saying, because we haven't sorted, we haven't organized, we haven't cleaned house or pruned back all these experiences that are like stamping in our brain essentially through the day.
Right. That's one of the ideas,
okay.
Right? Like that's one of them.
Okay.
Yeah. And that one's for slow wave sleep. And that's the one I'm most familiar with. But most of the ideas or most of the theories regarding the function of sleep or what sleep is doing has to do with kind of clearing out unneeded information and also resetting circuitry.
And so it's not passive, it's very active, and we'll be learning more about it, about the negative effects of not getting enough and positive effects of getting enough as we talk more. But when we talk about, well, what is enough or what's not enough, how much sleep do we need and why?
Yeah, so that is a difficult question, and it's the one that everybody always asks. In general, for adults, the recommended amount of sleep is anywhere between 7 and 9 hours per night. But everyone's sleep need is individual. So I am a bit of a long sleeper. I think I need at least like 8 or 8.5 hours to feel my best. Other people only actually need, 6.5, 7 hours to sleep a night and they're fine. So it varies an individual sleep need, but the average for adults is anywhere between 7 hours and 9 hours per night.
So what do you think of the Fitbit like type trackers that track our sleep and track the different stages of sleep or how many hours we're asleep? I feel like mine has given me a pretty good picture, but what are your thoughts on these?
I mean, I think they're good in showing you what your behavior looks like. While they're not great at sleep staging, like the sleep stages are basically just built on what they think a normal sleep pattern would be, because a sleep cycle is about, X amount of hours long, and REM sleep, which is one of the stages, should be about X amount of minutes long and things like this. And so they do your staging based on the averages. So it might not be exactly correct for you. But I do think it is really good at showing you, I go to bed at 11 and I wake up at 7, or I go to bed some nights at 9 p.m. and other nights at midnight, and my sleep is kind of, all over the place. So I think in that way, it helps to see it just like it is for food logs. When someone's trying to lose weight, the first thing you do is, keep a food log just so you can even see what you're eating.
Yeah.
And once you actually see what you're doing, that helps to open your eyes, because what you're actually doing can be very different from what you think you're doing.
A lot of times you may think, oh, I'm getting 7 hours of sleep, but that's what time it was that you looked at the clock before you brushed your teeth, changed clothes, got into bed. And then when you actually look at, how much are you up through the night going to the restroom or anything like that, that 7 hours can quickly get squeezed, and it might be 5 hours and 45 minutes. And it's like, wow, you're telling yourself 7, but what's the real rest time? And well, I guess these aren't totally precise. When I look at it, I realize I'm telling myself 7, and a lot of times it's 5.5, and that's not good. Yeah.
Right. Exactly. So they're not terribly accurate, but they are helpful with sleep time and wake time, right? Like they do seem to get that pretty, accurately logged. And that is helpful in showing people what they're actually doing versus what they think they're doing.
And when we talk about, okay, well, if I'm only getting 5.5 hours on some of these nights that I was kind of faking myself out, thinking I was getting 7, what are these negative effects of sleep? And I was saying the word sleep deprivation, but you prefer the word restriction, it seems.
Yeah, I usually say sleep deficiency, like you're experiencing some, sleep deficiency, or your sleep is restricted. Deprivation, I think of in terms of like a total sleep deprivation or being deprived of sleep, because being deprived of sleep or a total sleep deprivation is different and creates a different physiological space than sleep restriction.
Or deficiency. Okay.
Yeah.
I've also seen it as referred to as like habitual short sleep duration. There's all these different names for it, but so sleep deficiency, sleep restriction. When we're not getting enough sleep, basically, what happens? What's the not so great consequences?
Yeah, there's a lot of them. So there are changes in cognition and in mood. You can have changes in regards to your overall well-being. I specifically study the sleep restrictions effects on glucose metabolism and insulin sensitivity and brain reward systems. There's also effects on cardiovascular system and cardiometabolic health. Those are the things that I specifically examine, but sleep restriction or having deficient sleep affects many aspects of physiology.
So if someone's suffering from depression already or anxiety already, not getting sufficient sleep is for most people only going to worsen these.
Yes. Or if you are at risk of depression or at risk of anxiety and you start having short sleep, that can then facilitate a depressive mood or anxiety that wasn't actually there, but then can facilitate it being there.
And when you talk about sleep and its impaired cognitive effects, that's our brain power and it's our memory and it's how we do on tests, and all of these falter when we...
And decision making, impulsivity and decision making, and is this the best choice for me right now? Those kinds of things are impaired when you are sleep deprived.
So making poor decisions and also being impulsive?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. And I think we probably all know
and that's in regards to, I was going to say, and that's in regards to, food and, driving a car.
Mm-hmm. Or your reaction to someone, if you're being short-tempered, if you're being sassy to somebody. Yeah. And your specialty, like your area that you have spent a lot of time researching, is also, which I think is really interesting to a lot of our listeners, the link with sleep and our weight and obesity and cravings and hunger. So talk with us about this, because there is a lot here. I always say there's 3 elements. People think, oh, what am I eating? And how much am I moving? What's my physical activity like? But sleep is right there on that equal platform. All three of these need to be addressed.
Yeah. So we don't know exact mechanisms for some of these things, but what we do know is that BMI is correlated with sleep times. So we know that people with short sleep times have higher BMIs than those that have longer sleep time.
And we'll say body mass index. Yeah.
Yes, sorry, body mass index, which is kind of a calculation that's made from people's height and weight.
So someone with shorter sleep duration has a higher BMI, a higher weight for their height.
Correct. And then we also know from some very well, carefully done controlled studies in the laboratory that you can take a healthy, young, lean individual, and this would be an individual that typically sleeps, about 8 hours a night at least. And if you sleep restrict them to 5 hours a night or 4 hours a night, and you do that for multiple nights, they start rating their appetite higher. Like they have a stronger appetite for salty foods, for starchy foods, and for sweet foods, for like snack foods. They'll also rate that they feel hungrier. And sleep scientists used to think that, well, of course you feel hungrier when you're sleep restricted because you're up longer. So you obviously need more energy to be awake longer. But it turns out in the last, I would say about decade, we've learned that the energy cost of extended wakefulness is actually quite modest. You don't need very much more energy to stay awake longer. And in fact, if you are kept awake all night, in the case of a total sleep deprivation, a study was carried out by a researcher in Colorado. When they kept participants awake all night long, the energy need for staying up all night long was less than 200 calories, I believe.
Wow.
So even if you stay up all night long, the extra energy required just to do that is very small, right? So when we are experiencing sleep restriction and sleep deficiency, but we feel hungrier and we're waiting, I would like to have more snack food. That's not because of an increase in energy need. So something else has to be going on to facilitate this increase in, I try not to say craving, but it is kind of craving, but we haven't really fleshed that out very well yet. It's starting to be done, but like this increased desire for food, and specifically for like snack foods, what's driving that? Since the increased energy need doesn't seem to be present, what is sleep restriction doing to facilitate this increased want for food?
And talked about some of the studies, the average calorie increase, like how many more calories a day people are eating when they are chronically sleep deficient.
Yeah, so on average, there's been a couple of studies that have shown that people are eating about 300 calories more per day in a state of sleep loss. So again, these are in, healthy, young, lean volunteers that we bring into the laboratory, and we'll either have them sleep 8.5 hours for X amount of days, let's say 4 or 5 days, and then we have them sleep in the laboratory, those same individuals on another occasion, for only 4.5 hours a night for 4 or 5 days. And then we, can run a bunch of tests on them and do blood sampling to see what their hormone levels are like for a bunch of different hormones that are involved in modulating food intake and things like that. But in studies like that, where we control food intake in the laboratory, we see that people are choosing to eat about 300 calories more per day. And you can imagine that, it doesn't take very much to eat an extra 300 calories than you need. That's like 2 small cookies or something like that.
Right.
But if you do that repeatedly, day after day after day, just from sleep restriction, you can see how that would, facilitate gaining weight.
And these calories that people are consuming more of, the research that I've seen on this, it's not just like you're having more calories from broccoli and
Right.
salmon. It's from things that
Right.
are carby, white carbs, salty. So like just the salty white or sweet sugary, those types of foods, which are not
Yeah.
desirable. They're not giving us any benefit.
Right. I mean, it's super interesting because when individuals were just rating, right? When it was just ratings, like how hungry do you feel right now, or how strong is your appetite for these specific foods right now? They specifically rated feeling or having a stronger appetite for snack foods. While there was an increase for dairy and vegetables and fruits and things like that, the increase wasn't nearly as robust as it was for snack foods, for chips and candy and stuff like that. And when we allow people kind of like a cafeteria diet in the laboratory to see what they are eating, it's the snack foods that increase in the state of sleep restriction over, salad or spinach.
Mm-hmm.
Sleep restriction doesn't seem to facilitate, an increased desire for carrots. I mean, people can think about, when they are, doing all-nighters, or when they're in school and, or when your children had you up late at night, you weren't thinking, what I would really love right now is, some peas.
Right.
No,
right.
You think I need a Snickers or, some cookies. It's always like the fast snack, yummy, hedonically pleasing foods. And that is what science has also been showing us.
I'd like to take a minute to talk about Billy, sponsor of this week's podcast and an Allure Best of Beauty winner. Billy has recreated everyday essentials by delivering premium razors and high-performing body care directly to you. Go to mybilly.com to get their starter kit for just $9. That includes their award-winning razor, 2 refill blades, and a magnetic holder that keeps your razor safe and dry between uses. And Billy just released 3 completely clean must-have products to add to your routine: lip balm, dry shampoo, and face wipes. So it's a perfect time to stock up. I love Billy's products, and you will too. They leave our skin feeling so soft. And to express a little love for our show, go to mybilly.com/fueled. It's a small way that you can support us while also getting the best razor you will ever own. It's just $9 for your starter kit, plus free shipping always. Go to mybilly.com/fueled. That's spelled mybillie.com/fueled. So I know one of the biggest, weaknesses for a lot of people, and kind of people feel like, okay, I've got my game plan together all day. I'm planning my meals. I've got my breakfast, my snacks, my lunch, my afternoon snack. I've got my, dinner that I'm getting it all together. And they feel like really accomplished in the choices that they're making, that these are really like nutrient packed, well planned, to help them achieve their goals or maintain where they are. But the witching hours for a lot of people, and this is myself included, is often late at night, after dinner. And I find that there's a couple of things that I see with people, and this is not necessarily, this is more just late night what happens. I think for some people, when they have a lot of stuff swirling through their head and the world is quiet, then all of a sudden eating becomes a way to unwind. It's a distraction from maybe the stress or that feeling overwhelmed. They eat and it helps them to kind of numb out. But I'm also thinking that late night hours, let's just say it's 10 or 11 o'clock, and it's that late night hours that someone is opening the pantry, you stare in there as if something has appeared that wasn't there the hour prior, like you just like maybe something else is going to show up on these shelves. Would that
or whatever is there would seem more attractive now.
right. Or what concoction can we create out of this plus this? But would it be because, let's just say hypothetically it's 10 p.m., 11 p.m., would it be because our bodies are almost entering that state of sleep deficiency or sleep restriction? If we got up, let's say we got up at 5 a.m. and now it's 11 o'clock at night, we're almost like the people in your studies at that point.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. I hadn't really thought of it like that before. But yes, and especially since typically during a work week, it compounds with each day, right? It's not like, people typically are short sleepers during the week and catch up on the weekend. So perhaps, what you're describing, it might be easier to curtail on Monday and Tuesday night because your sleep debt isn't as high as it is once you get to Thursday and Friday night, when you had, 3 nights of 5 hours of sleep behind you instead of just one,
Yeah. Yeah.
But that is an interesting point. So most of our studies are carried out after individuals have spent at least 3 days in a sleep condition. And there is a kind of dose effect of sleep restriction in that, studies that, have people be in the laboratory for 14 days in a row, and each night they sleep for 5.5 hours. While the direction of effects is the same, it might be less of an effect than, 5 nights of 3 hours or something like that.
Yeah. Yeah. And you feel it. And so I think for our listeners, if you're like me and, and my husband will say, Molly, what are you doing? I'm like, I know, I'm feeling snacky, and I'll realize it. And that same feeling doesn't happen maybe 2 hours earlier. It's when, and I'll even say, I just need to go to bed. And now it kind of puts it in a different reason of why, to help.
Well, I would say, I try to tell people it's not your fault. It's biology.
Right. But then it's up to us to say, okay, well, let me try to close this gap of sleep deficiency that I do have. So with the study you were talking about, the young, lean, healthy individuals that typically had 8.5 hours, and then you brought them to 4.5 hours, you saw significant changes. Talk to us about the changes you saw in their hormones, and tell our listeners a little bit about ghrelin, leptin, and what this means.
I will. So in those same studies that were carried out years ago, in which people rated feeling hungrier, feeling more hungry following sleep loss, or having a stronger appetite, during those studies, my mentor here at the University of Chicago is a woman by the name of Dr. Ev Van Cotter, and her laboratory kind of pioneered the research in regards to the changes in peripheral systems following sleep restriction. So she's the first that showed that you can take a healthy, lean, young individual and, just with sleep restriction, they'll look like they're an elderly individual with type 2 diabetes.
Wow.
So her studies are set up so that you can do 24-hour blood sampling in individuals. So we can have people stay in the lab with us for a week. And over that week, one of the tests we'll do is 24-hour blood sampling. So they'll have a catheter in their arm. There's a long line that goes through a hole in the wall so that the nurses don't have to wake the participants up in the middle of the night. And we're able to measure take blood samples multiple times over a 24-hour period. And then we're able to look at different hormones and peptides that are involved in stress responses, but also that are involved in the regulation of food intake and energy balance. And one of those first studies that she conducted that did the appetite and hunger ratings, they also looked at 2 hormones called leptin and ghrelin. So leptin is a hormone released from fat tissue, and more leptin means eat less, right? So if you have more fat, then your body is saying we have plenty of energy stores. Leptin gets released from those energy stores to go back to the brain and say, we have plenty of energy. We don't need a lot of food right now. And so more leptin from fat means less food. The other hormone that she looked at in that original study was ghrelin. And ghrelin is a hormone that is released from the stomach, and it sends a signal to the brain to say we should eat now. It's a erexogenic.
The way that I help people remember it is, leptin, which, as you said, tells our brains basically, hey, you've had enough. We've got enough body fat here. We don't need more. But ghrelin is the opposite. Hey, you need more. Ghrelin is spelled Grehllin, but I remember it as like a gremlin. It's like the little gremlin telling your brain that, because people get confused. Which one's the good one or the bad one, as they'll call it? Grehlin's a little gremlin telling you to eat more.
Yes, that's a good one. So, and now I will always think of gremlin when I'm doing ghrelin analysis. And so when the lab did this original study, they saw that leptin levels were lower following a period of sleep restriction, and ghrelin levels were higher following the period of sleep restriction. So both of these were going in the direction to promote sleep intake. And so this was one of the first studies to show that there was actual biological changes happening in the periphery just, from sleep restriction that would then be sending a signal to the brain that said, hey, eat more.
Right. And this is, as you said, they're young, they're lean, they're healthy.
Yes.
Like they don't have any of these issues. And in just a few short nights, their bodies were shifting to become this.
Exactly. Yes, exactly. Their brain was getting the signal that they should eat more. And at the same time, in regards to glucose metabolism and insulin sensitivity, that was being altered into a impaired glucose tolerance state. So not only is the brain getting sent the message, we should eat more, and I want to eat more snack foods, but then glucose metabolism and insulin sensitivity is going in the direction of looking like pre-diabetes. So the whole thing is getting out of whack just from food restriction.
And that's in a few short days of this. We're not talking even months.
No, these studies, I think, were 4 days in each condition. Actually, now that I'm saying this, I think it was 2 days of 4 hours in bed versus 2 days of 10 hours in bed. So it was only in those 2 days that was sufficient to cause these alterations.
And what do these testing conditions look like? So as people are listening and you're thinking, okay, you've got these people and they're in these like metabolic chambers and we're testing their sleep. Walk us through visually kind of what this picture looks like.
Yeah, so we actually don't have the metabolic chambers. There's a group at Colorado that does have those, and everything is in those individuals' room, and they're like hermetically sealed so that they can measure, all of the inputs and outputs. But in our laboratory, our sleep lab it kind of looks like a hospital room, but also a hotel. Like we try to make it comfy, but it's also a hospital. So, but we'll usually have a big bed, and because participants stay with us nightly for weeks at a time. Typically, our studies will be about 1 week long, and then there's a as we call it, washout period, and they'll go home for a little while, and then they come back and do another week or another condition. And during the week that individuals stay with us, the reason we like it to be more than one night is so then we know what all the sleep was leading up to our measurements. We can do that with people wearing kind of like you said, a Fitbit before, but we have like fancy science Fitbits that are a little bit, have a little bit more information in them than just a Fitbit. So we'll either have people wear those watches at home and then come sleep in the lab for a few days before we do some testing, or they stay with us the whole time before testing. And testing involves it can be any number of things. We usually will do polysomnography, which is the gold standard of sleep measurements. In that way, we're able to look at brain waves, and we're able to look at people's respiration and things like that to have an idea of what their brain is actually doing when they're asleep, and to get some idea regarding sleep architecture and stages. We then will do oral glucose tolerance tests to get an idea in regards to glucose metabolism and insulin sensitivity. We do 24-hour blood sampling. So individuals will have a catheter in their arm and a long line that goes through the wall, so the nurses can draw blood repeatedly over a 24-hour period and don't have to enter the room. The individuals, our participants, will always do questionnaires in which we're asking them questions about how they feel at certain times of day, how hungry they are, how strong is their appetite for something, how sleepy do they feel. So we'll use polysomnography, which is the gold standard of sleep measurements, and people have that for like sleep studies when they have to go find out if they have a sleep disorder. But in the laboratory, we use it so that we can see the different brain waves of individuals over the night of sleep, so we can see the sleep stages and sleep architecture is what we call it, like what order and how long they're in each of the sleep stages.
And how is that?
We can
how
also
does that measure? Like, what does it look like on their body, on their head?
Right. So on their head, it is, I don't even remember how many. And our sleep tech would kill me that I cannot.
It's okay. We won't tell.
Just say it.
It's
Don't
just
tell
between all of us listening.
Yeah, never tell.
Mm-hmm.
There are 12 wires connected to the head. I have to look it up.
That's okay, but they're connected with like the stickers that would.
Yeah. It's a little bit of glue and electrodes that get glued to the head in specific places. And the specific places are important because your brain waves travel in your brain in certain directions, and so if the wires that we put on your head aren't haphazard, they actually go in distinct places so that we can see what's happening in the brain there versus, the
right.
back side, things like that.
Are those only on them while they're in the bed to be sleeping, or are they sometimes, like say they're in that room, are they there for the daytime that they're there?
It depends on the study.
Yeah.
So in the sleep restriction studies, we do typically leave them on during the day because then we can get wake EEG measurements or wake brain measurements so we can see what's happening in their brain during the day when they're doing specific tasks.
Yeah.
Also, it's helpful even if we're not recording because, for instance, I'll be sitting in the control room and I'm making sure that a subject is staying awake. And while their eyes might be open and they look like they're watching TV, I can look at the computer and their brain is telling me that they're asleep. And so even though they behaviorally look awake, their brain is not. So that's when I'll, go into the room and, talk to Mr. Johnson just a little bit to help keep him engaged and remind him to try to not fall asleep. And, should we play a board game now to try to get him through this,
it's
this sleepy period.
Hard for them to assimilate what their real life really is because they are in a space that's foreign to them. And it's set up like a bedroom. Like you have your bed, a nightstand. Is there like...
And your own private restroom. Yes. So it is like a little bedroom. And the one thing I would say that my mentor at University of Chicago, Dr. Ev Van Cotter, has always said is that we are probably underestimating in our studies the ill consequences of sleep restriction in these particular studies, because in the laboratory, we bring them their meals and they can watch TV or do a little bit of work or read a book. These stressors of real life don't exist in the laboratory, right? Like a kid is not asking you for something, your boss isn't calling or, might be, but the stressors of real life are kind of removed in our
sort of like you're just hanging in a hotel room.
Yes.
Yeah.
And while that might be boring, and unless, you don't like some of the tests, it doesn't come with the same stressors of real life that are, compound the sleep restriction also.
So if someone signs on for this, like, who are the people? Because that's a big thing to sign on to be part of a test like this, where you're going to be maybe separated from your family or your partner. You're doing this, and they're putting themselves through some of this. So it's impressive that you get these volunteers.
Well, most of our studies, like I said, happen in the sleep restriction studies at least happen in young, lean individuals. And very often they're college students or, just out of school students. A lot of them I participated in the summertime. It can be people in between jobs, but in the studies that looked at hunger and appetite and leptin and ghrelin. Oh, and I'll have to tell you about endocannabinoids because I don't think I've mentioned that yet. But all of those individuals were, on average about 23 or 24 years old. So they were on the younger side.
Yeah, right. It's not as grueling for them to be out of their element and stuff. But I think it's, we hear about sleep studies. We I've read the research on, when we are sleep deficient and how it impacts us, but to really truly get an understanding of everything that goes on the back end of that, it's really fascinating to me. So we have covered a lot so far with Dr. Hanlon, the negative consequences, and there are many, of sleep deficiency, how this sleep deficiency, and not even chronic sleep deficiency, but even just a few days of not getting enough sleep can contribute to weight gains, cravings. It can really be a driving force behind obesity. And we got a really cool peek behind the curtains with Dr. Hanlon of what these studies actually look like. So we're going to pause there for part one. I would really encourage you guys to stick around with us for next week's episode, part two. We're going to be talking about a fascinating aspect of sleep and the influence of sleep on our endocannabinoids. Those are basically our body's endogenous cannabinoid production system. And so things like THC, which we're really familiar with, our bodies produce similar types of compounds, and sleep has a huge impact on this. Dr. Hanlon and I also will be talking about the positive effects of optimal sleep. We've kind of set the stage to help us understand all the detrimental things that can happen when we get too little sleep. But what about when we get enough sleep? What does that look like? And then proven strategies to help enhance sleep. So strategies that we can incorporate, behavioral changes. We'll also be talking about sleep medications and sleep supplements. So lots to stay tuned for. And tune in to next week's Fueled Wellness and Nutrition podcast for even more about the benefits of better sleep and how to actually get there. We covered a lot again with Dr. Hanlon today. We've got the links to a lot of the things that we talked about in today's show notes of this episode. And of course, as always, let me know what you think. I am registered dietitian Molly Kimball, and you've been listening to Fueled Wellness and Nutrition, the podcast. If you would like more Fueled Wellness and Nutrition, please head over to mollykimball.com, and you can follow me, Molly Kimball RD, on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. And if you haven't yet, please go to Apple Podcasts and subscribe, rate, and review this podcast. Join us next week for another dose of Fueled Wellness and Nutrition. Thanks for listening, and stay focused on living your strongest, healthiest life.